Good afternoon. His Excellency, the President of Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, Dr. Mohammad Ashraf Ghani. His Excellency, Mr. Salahuddin Rabbani, Minister of Foreign Affairs. His Excellency, Mr. Muhammad Hanif Atmar, National Security Advisor. His Excellency, Mr. Aqleel Hakimi, Minister of Finance. His Excellency, Mr. Abdul Salam Rahimi, Head of Staff of President's Office. Her Excellency Nargis Nihan, Acting Mines and Petroleum Minister. His Excellency Shahzad Akbar, Advisor to President. His Excellency Dr. Shahida Muhammad Abdali, the Ambassador of Afghanistan to India. Ambassadors and High Commissioners and members of the Diplomatic Corps. Admiral K.K. Nair, the President of the Board of Trustees of the Vivekananda International Foundation. Friends from the media, distinguished members of the audience, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Vivekananda International Foundation and my own behalf, I extend a warm welcome to you, sir, and the members of your delegation who found time to visit the VIF. We are honored that from a busy schedule, you could find a few minutes to talk to us and to interact with the strategic community in Delhi. Excellency, your visit to India at this juncture is a reflection of the deepening of ties between our two countries, governments and the people. India, as always, stands with the people of Afghanistan in their endeavor to meet the myriad challenges that they are facing. During your tenure as President, you have contributed a great deal to the strengthening of relations between our two countries. Your commitment to strong India-Afghanistan relations and for peace and stability in the region is highly appreciated in this country. We are glad that India and Afghanistan are witnessing an intense period of engagement. New areas of cooperation have emerged. Excellency, last year speaking on the occasion of joint inauguration of Salma Dam, Prime Minister Modi had said, and I quote, "Your friendship is our honor, your dreams are our duty." It is in this spirit of friendship that we welcome you here, and we look forward to hearing from you, Excellency.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dr. Gupta, thank you for that very generous introduction. Admiral Nair, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, friends. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. Let me first begin with the global context, then move to the regional context, then to national context, and then discuss the new context provided by the South Asia strategy of the United States, and then we can engage in a discussion. We live in a radical environment of global uncertainty. There are four drivers of this uncertainty. First, the shape of the definition of the 21st century is unclear. There's a struggle over the definition of the 21st century, so rules of the game regarding the 21st century have yet to be shaped. Periods, if history is a judge, periods when the global rules of the game are uncertain produce enormous misguessing. Instead of analysis, we engage in guesstimations, but we act on our perceptions rather than on realities. Second, the global economy is on 4 speeds. The prospect of globalization has waned. Western Europe, the consensus is, the European Union rather, is going to have an extremely difficult time growing. The United States may recover, but the prospect of sustained jobs in bringing down poverty and inequality are considerable challenges. China is likely to settle to 6% rate of growth. The bright prospect is India, regarding a consensus of 8% potential rate of growth. In this kind of situation, inequality between men and women, poor and rich, the bonds that we knew from the welfare state are under attack. And because of it, democratic process is failing, considerable stresses and strains, which translates into short-term policies. The only game in town, as Mohammad Aryan said, are the central banks. And the central banks are reaching their limit. The third driver of uncertainty is what I call the fifth wave of violence. Terrorism is manifesting itself in its fifth wave since the launch of anarchism. And it's radically morphing. I think we can have a consensus that the level of threat posed by terrorism today is much larger than what it was in 2001. But the response to terrorism is country-focused, not global, not regional. And because of that, the networks, transnational networks of terrorism, are combining with transnational criminal economic organizations to pose a fundamental challenge. Never has political violence been so well funded and grounded in so much interactivity, and when you add cyber to it, in terms. So face to faceless is combining with face-to-face networks, producing an entirely new challenge to hierarchy. States are slow, networks are fast. Our response as states is incredibly slow vis-a-vis the challenges that we face. And the fourth driver is the fourth industrial revolution. What we know as structure of jobs is likely to become obsolete. So we are engaging in economic policies that are made for 140, 60 years ago, rather than looking forward to. In this environment, uncertainty is not just characteristic challenge for countries that are in conflict, it's a global challenge. It's not that there are stable models that we are looking for. The whole global situation is one of uncertainty. Second, regionally. On the one hand, we're facing probably the greatest moment in Asian history. The prospect of an Asian continental economy emerging. Only once, in 1869, when the United States became a continental economy by joining the Atlantic and Pacific Railways, did we witness such a phenomenon. Here, to put it simply, the Great Trunk Road can meet the Silk Roads. An Asian economy, continental economy, is no longer a dream. The prospects, particularly with the growth, not just India and China, everybody knows, but every day we're getting closer to a transport infrastructure, into an infrastructure of fiber optics, transmission lines, and others that would weave and knit the Asian continental economy together. But on the other side, Asia has been at war, the longest war, for 600 years. Asia as a concept, as a geographical space, has been a space of conflict for 600 years. There were two long wars, the 500-year War of Europe. Dean Acheson best characterized these in his book, Presented Creation. The Asian War still has not ended. The bulk of the conflict, use of violence, is still taking place in Asia. And here, The third characteristic, unfortunately, is that particularly in the area where we are standing and where I belong and the people I represent, the rules of the game between states have not firmed up. Because some states, as a matter of policy, resort to malign non-state actors as an instrument of policy. The distinction between good and bad terrorism is still haunting us. The challenge is becoming more pronounced. The response is fragmented and not coherent. All we need to look at is the UN paper on terrorism. And one of the things, a strategy to which, a convention rather, to which all the states have signed, but that document clearly indicates that state sponsorship of terrorism as a global phenomena is a threat. And because of this, the regional environment in which we deal is one of uncertainty. Instead of seeing one of the conflicts or enduring conflicts in the region as an opportunity to reach a regional consensus, lack of consensus, and more than that, active engagement and destabilization is a challenge. Instead of seeing that all of us engage in win-win policies, some players still engage in lose-lose policies. And that is a fundamental challenge. In this environment, if we take the question of my beloved country, of which I have the prospect, the honor to serving, first, the job in the last 3 years, first we tackled the impossible. Now we are dealing with the very difficult. It's improved radically. But compared to any other job, it's still a very difficult job. Why did it seem impossible? Because Afghanistan had to engage in 2014, end of 2014, with 4 transitions under conditions of global and regional uncertainty. The first was political transition. For the first time in our long history, now documented not to be 4,000 years, but 6,000 years, we had a democratic transition of authority and not power. For the first time, the people of Afghanistan chose their leadership. And instead of adopting a winner-take-all approach, we adopted an approach of constituting a government of national unity, and most commentators in the region and the world give us about at most, generously, 3 to 6 months. But the government of national unity is well and functioning. Let's not forget, most established democracies take 6 months to establish a coalition government. That is the global norm now. It's not the global exception. But the politics of consensus in a country that has taken 40 years is a major challenge, and it needs to be constantly reconfigured, and I'll come back to. The point that I'd like to make, we can single out my young colleagues. There are a number of Afghans who've graduated from Indian universities. Could I call on them, please, to stand up? What politically Afghanistan is witnessing is one of the greatest generational changes. Half of our cabinet is under 40. In this generational change in a country that has endured 40 years of conflict is a phenomenal beacon of hope. We're attempting something that has not been done before. Generationally, people follow each other. They share similar experience. Our experience for 5 generations has been one of division. For the generation of 1970s, there's 1.5 million dead people between them, the division. And it goes on. but this likely to be the greatest generation of contemporary Afghanistan. And equally, I'm delighted that men and women are taking equal part. When you have a woman as Minister of Mines in Afghanistan that suffered from gender apartheid, it tells you where we've come. Or my chief advisor on the United Nations, or my chief advisor on economic councils. All graduates of top universities, women who will challenge any men to debate them. And please do not challenge an Afghan woman to debate. The second challenge, the second transition was security. We had one of the largest deployment of international forces of about 43 countries helping us. And we went suddenly to complete management of the security, leadership of the security by Afghan security forces. Let me pay to the men and women who, with payment of their lives, have secured our freedom, our dignity, and our sovereignty. Minister Atmar, thank you to you and to your colleagues. There's not a single battle where the Afghan army has run away. But the guessing, because we said we are dealing with a radical environment of uncertainty, was that the Afghan army would not last 6 months. Well, the Afghan army is well and good, thank you. But we've paid a very high price. So security environment, let's go back. The premise of the security transition that I had the honor of leading for former President Karzai asked me as a national duty, I responded, was that with the withdrawal of the international troops, peace will dawn. That the regional players will embrace peace, not conflict. Instead, we have seen a war imposed on us that has had no sense of mercy and no qualification. And we have contained it. So what I'm saying, we've achieved the impossible, is that now the people of Afghanistan trust that the survival of the state is not at stake. Yes, the fighting has been hard. The last thing I wanted to become on earth, given my formation and over a decade of teaching, was to become a war president. But I'm enormously proud to be the commander-in-chief of patriotic forces, a force that is fighting for nation, for honor, for God, for dignity. And we have a 4-year plan. And within 4 years, we can assure you that the Afghan security forces will achieve what Colombia achieved under President Turabi. An environment where Afghan men and women, the citizens of our country that are bound by the rule of law and constitution, will be able to live in peace and in security. The third transition was economic. Our economy was totally dominated by the international forces. For each member of the international force, there were at least 4 to 6 contractors. So you had middle-class demand in one of the poorest countries, upper middle-class demand, and this was suddenly taken out. Because of that, we experienced a great recession bordering on a depression. Now even the IMF is projecting 3.5% rate of growth. We've come out of the sheer depth of an economic meltdown to economic growth. And this is being reflected in the latest Foundation survey that is projecting 60% optimism regarding the future. The fourth transition was in the culture of the state. The state was being perceived as an estate, as a series of claims of property rights for various networks, and where corruption had become the norm. Our fundamental issue has been to tackle our problems and to own them. I hope Mr. Ambassador is here, other colleagues, the international community does not preach to us regarding what our problems are. We own our problems, we solve our problems, we tackle our problems, and we will increasingly be able to overcome them. And the change in the culture of the state is the fundamental issue that we are tackling. Today, I'm enormously proud that the Chief Justice of Afghanistan, the members of the Supreme Court of Afghanistan, the Attorney General of Afghanistan are known for their integrity and impartiality. This is the legacy that we hope to transmit to the future generations. Let me turn now to the question of foreign policy and regional and national relations. In Afghanistan, foreign policy is domestic policy. Simply put, why? Because we are not facing a civil war, we're facing a regional and global set of challenges in terms of security, in terms of economy, and of course, in terms of stability. I hope that it has been demonstrated, and thank you for the remarks, and I would like to acknowledge the remarkable leadership of Prime Minister Modi, the government of India, and the 1.2 billion people of India. India gave us a 1 billion generous package of assistance for the Brussels conference last year in October. In effect, every Indian has contributed $1. Thank you, every Indian. Billions of ties bind us through thousands of years of history, but our partnership is based on a vision of the future. A vision where our central challenge is poverty, inequality, and insecurity. Not at the subnational level, but at the regional level. South Asia, despite its enormous history of connectivity, today is the least connected region of the world. And because of it, our fundamental challenge is to bring vision to this and cooperation. In 2001, when 9/11 happened, there was a spontaneous consensus in the region and the world that a stable Afghanistan was to everybody's benefit. Alas, in 2014, this consensus did not exist. And we, as the government of Afghanistan, have had to work incredibly hard to make sure that a set of relationship established where the region, again, reaches consensus based on a view of shared interest and with an understanding that cooperative advantage, that there is a competitive advantage in cooperation rather than confrontation and conflict. What have we achieved? First, a breakthrough in our partnership relationship with the United States. The South Asia strategy of the United States that I'll return to is a fundamental manifestation of this. Let us not forget, President Obama had publicly announced that American troops would be reduced to 600, American embassy based. We were able to restore this partnership and fundamentally transform it. Second, we've reversed 117 years of history vis-a-vis our northern neighbors in Central Asia. Today, Afghanistan is incredibly well connected to Turkmenistan, to Uzbekistan, to Azerbaijan, and beyond that, to Georgia and to Turkey. With the launch of Lapis Lazuli Road, we will be a railway system, transport agreement. We'll be able to reach Europe within 5 days. The railway terminal in Aqina in northern Afghanistan is already removed, and I hope that by time of my visit to Uzbekistan, when we'll be signing 16 agreements, a foundation for connecting Central Asia to the Gulf and beyond will be established. We are talking potentially about 15 million tons of cargo going through northern Afghanistan, in southwestern Afghanistan. I picked an exact date because in 1998, the Russian Empire imposed a tariff that made trade between then India and Central Asia drop to a halt. And we had 117 years of isolation. This is extremely important. The Secretary General, if you want to witness, ask His Highness the Secretary, His Excellency the Secretary General of the United Nations. He spent a week in Central Asia. And when he came to Afghanistan, we're delighted to hear that our Central Asian neighbors were looking south. TAPI, the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline, which everybody thought was a pipe dream, in February of 2018 is going to reach Afghanistan. We are going to be the first country to have access to Turkmen gas. We are creating the basis, CASA 1000, the Central Asia, South Asia electricity transmission line. We are moving to construction, again, an impossible project, but we are talking about transfer of 5,000 to 15,000 megawatts of power from Central Asia to South Asia. The first fiber optic line across the Wuhan corridor from China, we've agreed in principle, and the 5-country railway that will connect us to China from Tajikistan to Kyrgyzstan and then on to Iran is now seriously under a feasibility study. With Iran, we've had a dialogue that our Iranian counterparts are describing as something that has not happened in 100 years. And equally, of course, with India and China, it's obvious, I do not need to go, that we've forged relations that provide the basis. Where we have not had progress, despite trying, unfortunately, has been with Pakistan. We held the hand of peace and the hand of dialogue. Unfortunately, we saw conflict and intensification of conflict. But we hope that the new context, which I will now return to and then answer your questions, would enable us to bring a new perspective and hopefully new outcomes. The South Asia strategy announced by President Trump is a game changer. Because first, let's remove a fundamental misunderstanding or ambiguity. The goal of the strategy is a twofold stabilization in Afghanistan and stabilization in South Asia. And the key instrument is political. A dialogue that would result in internal peace and regional peace. And second, the instruments are multidimensional. It's not a single-dimensional strategy that just relies on use of force, but diplomatic and economic instruments are equally significant to this approach. And thirdly, it singled out India for engagement in this approach, and particularly on the economic front, where India has been such an important partner to us, from the air corridor to Salma to Parliament to a range of other issues. And fourthly, it's a condition-based approach. As Secretary Tillerson stated yesterday, the strategy requires fulfillment of conditions. Let me now highlight both the current conditions and then the prospects. First, the Afghan security, we have 7 army corps, 6 deployed in the provinces, and 1 our special forces that has just been elevated from a command to a corps command. Our commando forces are doubling, our air force is tripling. What's the meaning of this? The state is not at risk of collapse. Just the special forces are sufficient to underwrite the sovereignty of the state. Last year at this time, all 6 of our army corps had been come under attack and had faced severe losses. Today, all 6 army corps are on advance. We're winning the rural war. The prospects of prevailing in the rural war are good. The problem is, one of the worst attacks on human history has been launched against our urban population and against our civilians. This needs condemnation. This is a global level outrage. Mirza Ghulam, Shinwar, the mosques, these are fundamental violations of human rights and abuses that require prosecution. So it's important. I'm not given to a hysteria because my people did not elect me to scream. My people elected me to reason. And reason is what we must muster, because when the going is tough and the job is impossible or extremely difficult, you need steadiness of purpose. Nerves of steel, and instead of a heart, you need to put a piece of stone in your chest. Because the casualties that our civilians incur, the losses that our children suffer, the pain that is inflicted on our women is unspeakable. This cannot be tolerated. But we must move forward. So in this regard, what are the challenges? The challenges I've outlined. The question fundamentally is twofold. Peace internally. Our approach to internal peace is to own it through Afghan government-led process. We have a record of success. Nobody thought that the leader of Hizb Islami, Mr. Engineer Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, would now be living in Kabul through an intra-Afghan peace dialogue. We succeeded. We demonstrated that we have the intention, the political will, the capacity for discussion, and all of it done through an intra-Afghan dialogue. We need to take this issue out because we would like a push factor from Pakistan vis-a-vis Taliban, not a Pakistan-managed peace process with the Taliban. Why? Because we want peace with Pakistan. And that's the fundamental issue for our stability and regional stability. Because the issue to us is not Taliban, the issue is our peace and security. Taliban are one manifestation of this. The larger issue is destabilization of Afghanistan. And because of it, we've held the hand of dialogue in discussion. But this, again, is to be done by deeds and not by words. Usually at this time, in 2015 or 2016, I could tell you the shape of the coming year and the nature of conflict that we would be facing. Today, I cannot. But in 2 months, I will be able to tell you more or less with 80% accuracy. Why? Because we need to deal with scenarios and the drivers in a context where the context has changed, and the question is whether the leadership of Pakistan and all our friends and allies from India to Azerbaijan, Iran, and extending to Russia would re-emerge on a consensus on the need for a stable Afghanistan. Specifically, let's take up the most fundamental issue, nature of violence. Last year, we underwent 5 waves of violence. The war had 5 phases. And the most brutal started on October 5th, when the world pledged $15.2 billion. Now, this year, in 2017, the war had gone through 2 phases. The 3rd phase took place in the last 2 weeks. It's one of the most brutal phases. So the indicators for us are very simple. Will the intensity of violence continue through the winter? But most significantly, will 2018 be a year of intense conflict? This does not require debate. It does not require huge discussion. It requires registration of the level of violence on the bodies of our women, on our mosques, on our public buildings. So we will be able to judge whether there is an intention or lack of it. Second, will there be a pause in 2018 in order to prepare for a worst conflict in 2019? Third scenario, gradual change but cumulative. And fourth, desirable but whether feasible, a breakthrough. All of these require coordination. All of these require persistence, and what is fundamental is we should not engage in mutual deception. We should engage in a responsible dialogue as globally and regionally responsible stakeholders and as responsible human beings. Because it's that level of responsibility on which not just the prospect of Afghanistan and how the generation of Afghan children will grow depends, but also on how the region is shaped and ultimately the world. Last words. The case for Afghanistan is largely been made on negative grounds, meaning that if the Afghan government, God forbid, were to collapse, what would happen to the region? And what would happen to the world? I'm not engaging in that. That I leave to you. One Osama, and what was he capable of doing? Now there are 20 internationally recognized terrorist groups operating. My proposition is that none of these groups would function to their degree of effectiveness if it were not for the platform provided by Taliban networks and for drug running organizations. Drugs need to be taken seriously as a regional problem and as a global problem. And it's not enough to just pay it and not. It needs to be tackled. So financing of violence, of political violence, needs to be tackled. The second issue is the positive case for Afghanistan. Our problems are, and our prospects are exactly located in the same thing, our location. And the person who captured it best was Iqbal, the poet laureate of Pakistan. Asia is but a body of water and earth, of which the Afghan nation is the heart. From its discord, the discord of Asia; from its accord, the accord of Asia. We have been at the heart of networks, a roundabout, a place of meetings, civilizations, religions, cultures, and of course, armies and traders and pilgrims. Afghanistan is the shortest route for connecting South Asia to Central Asia and South Asia to West Asia. Our mineral wealth, our tragedy is that we are potentially one of the richest countries on earth, inhabited by one of the poorest countries on earth. The country can move in a generation from poverty to with dignity, to living with dignity, and into prosperity. This connectivity is absolutely essential. So that positive case needs to be taken. It is now up to imagination and up to principle. We need courage, compassion, and determination in equal measure. Courage to think the unthinkable and to take those actions that will bring an end to these 40 years of violence for us, 600 years of instability for Asia. Compassion to understand that suffering inflicted on people is not justified. In determination that in case the hand of peace is rejected, to be willing to serve with honor as the commander-in-chief to the last breath and to the last drop of blood. Thank you.
We'll take some questions.
Of course, yes.
His Excellency has agreed to take a few questions, and I'll request Admiral Nair to kindly conduct this session, questioner session.
Thank you very much indeed, sir. Ambassador,
Excellency, you mentioned Lapizuli project, and you mentioned connectivity with Gulf, China, and Europe. While Afghanistan is doing so much to enhance connectivity, what is your view of importance of Chabahar and international north-south transit corridor for Afghan economy and for regional cooperation? Thank you.
Should I take them one by one? Certainly. Just an oversight. Chabahar is equally fundamentally important. And now it's not just the very important collaboration between India, Iran, and Afghanistan. We're going to be soon receiving, in a couple of weeks, within 2 weeks, over 100,000 of Indian wheat transferred via Chabahar to Afghanistan. The railway is connecting. But the larger prospect is now really connecting Chabahar to Central Asia. And this is going to be one of those great transformations to allow Central Asia, that has been landlocked, doubly landlocked. We are landlocked, but Uzbekistan is doubly landlocked, to connect. And the fundamental larger project is China, the 5-country railway that will go all the way from China to Iran. We need to diversify. A roundabout insists on each potential road, exploring it, because in the past, Afghanistan's history has been dominated after World War II by the threat of shutdown of transit. Now, no country can shut down our transit. We have an air corridor to India, so we jump over space that does not cooperate. We go by sea, we go by land, and we go by rail. It's important to realize Afghanistan is becoming a roundabout, not a cul-de-sac. And this is the prospect. And Chabahar, I think, is going to be an enormously important thing with the railways, roads, a cluster of things. But one of the most other significant things that needs is the fiber optic. The continental fiber optic linking India to Azerbaijan and in the network would provide a very important substitute for the sea lane in China, can equally be linked to Africa. So it's important, I think, to think through a new prospect of infrastructure and not just the traditional view of transport.
Thank you, sir. Sushant Sring.
Excellency, excellent lecture, everything we expected to hear from you. I have a question. I agree with you that Afghanistan can become a bridge between South, Central, and West Asia. But at a strategic level, how can Afghanistan leverage its important location to become a catalyst for a regional solution which stabilizes Afghanistan? Attached to this is another question. Afghanistan has been invited to join the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, but do you see a fundamental contradiction in inviting Afghanistan to be part of a connectivity project and denying Afghanistan access to India? And finally, a small third question, which is that in 2001, a handful of US troops with the Northern Alliance managed to rout the Taliban. Today, with so many foreign troops in Afghanistan, a very robust Afghan army, what is it that the Taliban are able to, carry out the kind of depredations they are carrying out, and what can be done to defeat them?
Thank you for three excellent questions. Let me take them in the reverse order. In 2001, the Taliban were exhausted. It was a spent political force, and it didn't have sponsorship. The Taliban ambassador to Pakistan was arrested and was told, "Excellency, you're no longer Excellency," and sent to Guantanamo. Because you know what happened in terms of the speech that General Musharraf gave. The first driver of conflict in Afghanistan are drugs. The country that is most useful for comparison is Colombia, because the Colombian conflict is very long, and now, thank God, we're beginning to see the end. But it is important to understand a security strategy and not confuse peace and security strategy. Peace is desirable, but was it feasible? We have to have a feasible approach to peace and not just a wishful approach. Second is state sponsorship. Sanctuaries are provided, logistics are provided, training is provided, ideological basis is provided. So instead of dramatizing what we are saying, Pakistan has come to a T-juncture and needs to make a choice. Will it choose normalization and state-level cooperation, or will it persist? And depending on what it chooses, global, regional, and our reaction will be determined. But the other part is we need to own our problems. We cannot be one of the most intensely corrupt countries on earth and think we are God's gift to earth. We need to tackle our corruption. This is not foreign imposed. It's domestically generated. On corruption, there's no national division. It's total national unity on corruption. And we have to master a total national unity on counter-corruption. Our young generation's prospects, when children's education is being stolen, that's unacceptable. The elite, so-called elite bargaining needs to give way to a citizen-focused Afghanistan. If you want to win the war, you have to win it morally too. You have to stand for rule of law, for justice, for fair play, and for opportunity. That's what will differentiate us, and that, I hope, is what we are doing in terms of this fundamental question. Could you remind me of the other two components? China, Pakistan. We're very clear. If we are not given access to Wagah Atari, we are not going to provide access to Central Asia. We have joined WTO for one simple reason, to have a free trade and transit agreement. India is our largest export market. And second, it's the first definition of sovereignty. The win-win approach is to open up to trade and transit. The lose-lose approach is to block it. But we have a lot more prospects. And let's understand, can there be connection between Central Asia and Pakistan without Afghanistan? 1 + 1, it's to 2. 1 - 1, it's to 0. So we are clear. We want to be what we call an Asian roundabout, a term that Toynbee specifically coined for Afghanistan. We don't want to be a cul-de-sac. We don't want to be blocking. We want to be promoting and facilitating. And this is crucial because the Asian economic integration is going to lift millions out of poverty instead of perpetuating this. The third component was... No, I answered, okay. Thank you. Yes, yes, sure.
Ms. Bhumia?
Excellency, you spoke about South Asia policy of US, and you spoke about your effort to strengthen Afghan security forces. So do you want India to, in fact, help you significantly in enhancing Afghan security forces in terms of supply of more defense equipment and platforms by India to Afghanistan?
Thank you. Our collaboration with India has been very open. We're delighted with 4 helicopters. The 4 Mi-35 helicopters were a lifesaver. More Mi-35 helicopters are welcome. The others are subject to discussion.
Okay. The last question.
But let me make an additional point. There are no secret agreements between Afghanistan and India. There are no secret Indian facilities. There is no destabilization of any neighbors from Afghanistan taking place through implicit or explicit collusion. Let's get out of the world of fiction. We are willing to verify all this.
Thank you. I'm General Chopra. I'm a veteran of 4 wars and with corporate experience at the top. Thank you for a very optimistic address. Being a soldier, I salute you, Mr. President. Now my intervention. You've talked about the regional context. That is what triggers my intervention. You recently concluded a quad, China, Russia, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. Now you've talked of the new US...
Russia was not there.
Pardon? Russia was not there. You've talked of the new South Asian strategy of the US. I find an inherent contradiction. You're talking to 2 people who are described as disruptive, and you've left out the US, who is the main provider of security in Afghanistan and many other things, and India, which you've highlighted yourself. How are you going to gel this? You're talking to people who are helping to disrupt you, and you're ignoring those who are for you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Well, General Chopra, you're a very distinguished leader, and I've enjoyed watching you on television whenever I've had the time. First, why am I in India? If I were ignoring India, I wouldn't be spending 3 hours with the distinguished Prime Minister of India. We have alignment of interest. And the South Asia strategy is an important tribute to the importance of India. There's a pivot towards India. And it's important to acknowledge that. You talk to those who are disruptive, not to those who are your friends, as the primary vehicle. Second, 4+, the quadrilateral, what's its importance? On paper, there's a commitment that to differentiate between reconcilable and irreconcilables and to use force against them. This is a valid, internationally certified commitment. It's been willingly entered. We want its enforcement. But second point, and absolutely to your point, we want a wider formula. On 25th of January, we are holding the second round of the Kabul process in Kabul. We held the first round right after the heinous bombing of May 31st, and we acknowledge the great courage of all our partners, including the Indian delegation that came and stood in solidarity with us. So by no means is the quadrilateral sufficient, but it is a necessary step to get, and the US is very much involved in the quadrilateral. Because the key issue is verification, General Chopra. We need credible international verification. We are a nation of laws. We do not engage in destabilizing our neighbors. No neighbor has been destabilized from Afghanistan. All our binding agreements with our partners are regarding bilateral or multilateral, but not in terms of use of Afghan territory for destabilization of others. We provide an open challenge. That's why I made the earlier statement, because we have to get out of this world of fiction. If you talk to some Pakistani taxi drivers in the United States, they will tell you that there are 40 Indian consulates in Afghanistan. Well, we have 34 provinces. We need to get to verification into reality, because this is fundamental. Because of this, I hope, as a person who's in mourning, day before yesterday, I was in Paktia, in the provincial city of Gardes. 2/3 Army Corps, where a woman, our entire police station was blown to smithereens. Every single window at the University of Gardes is broken. Civilians are being attacked, but we are focused on the objective. The objective is to pursue the goal of a stable and peaceful Afghanistan within the context of a stable and peaceful region. This means you have to do certain things bilaterally, certain things trilaterally, certain things multilaterally, but all need to come to a consensus. So your point, extraordinarily well taken. We want a regional consensus, but if the region cannot come together at one go, you need to work out the pieces to bring it. Afghanistan, fortunately, is good neighbors and difficult ones. And I hope I'm not offending. It's like a Catholic marriage. You cannot get out of it. You cannot get out of a bad neighborhood. You have to change the neighbors with you.
Thank you. Mr. President, we are grateful to you for sharing most candidly your worldview, the transitions which your great country is handling, and the security situation, the grim security situation which you are facing and which your government, your people, and above all you are handling so bravely. Sir, we applaud this effort of you in trying to achieve successfully and completely the transitions which you talked about. I think your victory is absolutely essential for the stability of not only your country, but the entire region around you. And that is why I think that the most countries, not only in the region, but the entire civilized world, requires to support your efforts in many directions. Sir, I can assure you that India will have every endeavor to help you in whatever is required in security and development issues as far as Afghanistan is concerned. And let me finish by saying that we are 100% certain that under your great leadership, the victory will certainly be yours. Thank you.
I'm humbled and I'm honored to be serving a people, to be their first servant, who despite all adversity, wake up dreaming of a better world. Thank you. Oh, that's beautiful. Yes, of course.